not laying down points as to what the mindset could be. One thing that has really changed, and I don't necessarily want to use the word change, but I guess let me say multiplied the agenda of devising the Black family is this entire idea of globalization, right? On one end, it is important for humanity as a whole. Unfortunately, it has become the responsibility of all of humanity to undo whiteness and what that has done to the world, because we share this planet whether we like it or not. What that has done has sort of reverted us back to a time immemorial where humanity used to be one thing before everyone was divided by where they lived and their own ideals and agendas, right? And that's what I see in the younger generation. That is the world that they're trying to strive towards. And as much as that is a noble idea, it does not necessarily want to, on either side, admit to history, acknowledge history, right? To say that the division happened and these are the reasons why it happened and these are the consequences. And more importantly, that specific line right there, these are the consequences of the division and of the policies and of the agenda that the different races have had, right? And that's where I think the notion of love being colorblind, we are one race, yes, we are the human race, but equally there's been a lot of politics around our interactions that equally need to be addressed. So I would think that as a young Black man, trying your best to not necessarily take into account to say, yes, okay, I'm not my history. I am not slavery. I'm not the failings to undo colonialization. But equally admitting that, without actually realizing, for you, yes, it's a person is a person and they are amazing. But equally, in your subconscious, you are aware that being African, being Black, comes with certain limits, right? It comes with certain liabilities as far as the global corporate system, the global economic system is set up, right? So rather, I go in with a relationship with another human being, but being aware that, okay, cool, if I'm African, for example, and I'm taking it to the absolute extreme, my partner is from Switzerland, I have a child who, depending on where life is going, can easily denounce their African side and have the benefits of having a white mother from Switzerland, right? And it's not something that we do, and I'm supposed to say we because I never like excluding myself from my generation, because I feel like that in and of itself is a problem, because the more you exclude yourself from a topic, the harder it is for you to influence it. It's like when we take kids from Ekasi, you don't allow them, even with your model C education, to still understand the problems of home. When they do come back home, they're so far removed from that life that they can never influence change, and there's nothing that they can say because they don't speak the language of the people at home, right? So that's the first mindset, moving away from all division by ignoring it completely and trying to build from a flat state. Then there's the second one, which I think is where I would fall into, is the perceived greatness of whiteness that was entrenched into the previous generations, right? Because in as much as, yes, white people own slaves, white people are the propagators of segregation, at some point as Black people, we need to acknowledge that we were the ones catching slaves and we sold it to them. At the end of the day, we became very horrible at our own business model, and we were given the short end of the stick. But there's a certain amount of accountability that needs to come from our side as well. And the systems that they've created allow for that division, whereby on one hand you truly had the fighters who had never lost the sense of the importance of the Black man man within the entire global landscape, and those who fell victim to the system and got the indoctrination of whiteness being superior, because it was creating faster and it was creating bigger, but they weren't necessarily seeing how that industrialization, if I were to put it that way, was undoing the very core values that have allowed African civilization to build sustainably for all of those eons, whereby most of these things that they celebrate in whiteness are byproducts of whiteness coming to study in Africa. We speak about people like Plato, like Aristotle, who were very much scholars of the African philosophy. It is these ideals of coming together as communities to speak that laid the foundations to what we call democracy today, right? So that's the second part, to say coming up into a generation that was far removed from home and the townships, with ideals that subconsciously were spoken to say, getting a white wife would be better. It wasn't ever said meant to degrade Africanness, but it placed Europeanness on somewhat of a pedestal. And saying these things to young kids, we really underestimate the impact that it has on kids as we grow older, and the way that we view the world and we view ourselves as we get older, right? And then comes the third part, which I guess all of these parts are actually speaking about the parts of my life, right? Is growing older and truly understanding where we are as a people, and having these types of conversations. As much as I have very mixed feelings about social media, one thing that I'm very, very thankful for is the fact that it allows us to form these echo chambers, which are very, very important, especially if the people are looking to rebuild. It is uniting us from all corners of the world, and we're actually able to speak about our problems outside of how media portrays them and how we can build. And that has been the learning journey that I've been on for the past 4 years. And actually asking oneself, what is a family? Is it your nuclear, or is it something greater? And I think that's where the education system comes in, because now we have a war of philosophies and a war of values, right? Our education system across the board has been very much westernized, and the values that we adopt and the thinking that we adopt, even to principles like democracy, are very westernized. And at that point, it's the conversation of, at 16 years old, what is the environment that you have created for the next generation? Is it one with absolutely no disrespect, and I hate this word of slay queens, but for lack of a better term, is it slay queens and Instagram influences, or women of substance that can still have fun, right? And that's the thing. I feel like we've created an environment where sometimes reaching for African ideals and reaching to help the African community has been placed as such an intellectual conversation that kids aren't being enticed into learning it. And so we would rather, even within trying to build the Black community, look at it from Western ideals, not fit our philosophy, which leads to a breakdown of the African family, and then media amplifies that breakdown of the African family. And what happens is just it becomes a very toxic cycle, right? Where our values, our philosophies, our thoughts on family being greater than just a nucleus, it loses traction between all of this noise of Black families just collapsing, right? I mean, I think about the term Black tax, and it has merits. Honestly, there are families that abuse the few that are actually able to stand up. But equally, it's because of how it's taught. In the same way, a few years ago, people were speaking about lobola as a bride price. And as someone that has sat down with elders and actually understood what this entire ceremony is supposed to represent, what it's meant to do to bring two families together. Things like that break my heart because my generation does not know these things. And more than anything, they are less interested in knowing them because it takes time, it takes patience, it takes truly applying yourselves to actually learn who we are as a people. And we have become a generation, and I fear even more for the younger generation because at least we had to go outside and play, with balls and trees. They literally have so much information, so much screen time that they don't even interact in person anymore. So, is love colorblind? It honestly depends on who is asking the question and who the question is being directed to. If we're looking to truly build the African family, then it definitely shouldn't be colorblind, right? But in the same breath, if you're looking to build a global family that is going to be, or trying at the very least, to somehow rectify thousands of years of injustice and indifference through two or three generations, then maybe it is colorblind. And I think it's just from that point that I kind of wish we had people of different ethnicities as well here to just chime in as well, because it's also very easy for us to, in our echo chamber, as much as it is good for building, be stuck in the same sort of mental processes. And coming from a position where systematically we've been oppressed, going outside is an opportunity, but for them, right? This is not for women that are going after the most successful of African men, but the average African man who a European or an Asian woman is attracted to. For them, what does that mean? Because essentially, from the position that they are at, they are putting their children in a situation whereby, because they are no longer pure white, they might find themselves in a situation whereby the same liberties that they were afforded as kids are now diluted, or just forfeited. So those are my initial thoughts. I'm honestly happy to be proven wrong on any of them. I'm here to grow, and I thank you guys so much for listening to me.
Thanks, Bongin Kosi. You've you've laid out a lot of things, yeah. Um, I'll draw out probably a few pointers from there. Uh, one, the first point I would like to draw from what you've spoken about is how your parents, or rather, basically, your family or the black families would make jokes about that one's gonna marry a white girl, you know. Same joke was made in my family by the females in my family about me as well. But yeah, so that comes to these kind of jokes, psychologically rooted in the view that white you marrying a white girl would be an improvement. It would be a step up in life. You would be definitely, if you did and you went to a family reunion, you'd be more respected. Your wife would not be expected to do what other African women are expected to do. If she just follows you around and she will be standing when you're out there with the guys doing whatever the guys are doing, and she comes and joins you, they would understand, stuff like that. So because somehow the whole world is indoctrinated. So if black people are indoctrinated with white supremacy and white people are indoctrinated with white supremacy, the difference between the black people and white people is uh, the white supremacy in white people is driven more by fear. So a lot of people when we talk about because generally if we were to ask this question, would if you're a conscious black person, would you marry a woman who is a Ku Klux Klan? We don't have AWB in South Africa anymore. But would you marry a girl who basically is a right winger? And a lot of people would say no. But most people, when they think about color being blind or not, if one person says they can marry a white person, they think of white people that that don't hate black people, you know. And obviously, there's a lot of white people that do not hate black people. So the problem there is black people think that racism is hatred for black people. Well, it ain't got nothing to do with hate because there are two types of white people are racist. Let me just put it like that. Anybody want to prove me wrong? They can step up, whether they're white or black, and can defend themselves. I would say 99.999% of white people are racist. Why do I say this? There are two kinds of racists. There is a conservative where you have Orania. Orania in South Africa is a city or a state or whatever it is in the northern Cape in South Africa, and it's a white only. It's a white only. What do you call it? White only city. So obviously you will have black people walking around there, and if you see black people there, they probably work. They are there to serve the people, the citizens of that city. So when black people think of the nasty or racist, they think of white people in Orania, the Ku Klux Klan, um, the right wingers, the ones that will tell you in your face, "I hate nigga," you know. So excuse the N word. So the that's basically the blind spot in in this whole war against white supremacy. Supremacy in inverted commas. I put it in inverted commas because it's the concept of white supremacy is not a real concept. It's the concept because people have bought into it. Much like being afraid of a dead snake. A lot of people, if you're scared of snake, like go grab it. It's dead. You're not gonna grab it. So that's the illusion of it. And so that's the power of of the fear that you have for snakes. So, um, but the the most interesting thing, if someone comes to understand the system, they'll know that the most dangerous between a conservative who says it into your face, "I don't like black people," and "Oh, go back to Africa," or whatever. And that is the least dangerous racist. Why? Because that person is like, it's like, just imagine in a battlefield, and if there's a war we're fighting with, you are fighting a war with another group of people, and those people come guns blazing, and with trumpets and saying, "We're coming to kill you," even send out messages, send out a messenger, 2 days before, "We're coming in the next 24 hours, we're coming to kill all of you." You know, that's a conservative. That's your Orania, your Ku Klux Klan. They already tell you they hate you. Whereas when you think about the art of war, it involves deception. That is the power of, it's called an art in that aspect. Going up to someone and saying, yeah, I'm coming for you. There is no art there unless you you're doing it with a different strategy. Perhaps the person might be crippled by the fear of you coming, but that really depends. We don't want to really get too technical with it. But in general, if a person applies an art of war, if you study martial arts, if you've ever, uh, the first thing they train you, it's all about deception, and you trick someone to think. I mean, imagine just boxing. You throw a small left hook, but what's really coming, and get the person to focus on that, and then you give them the one that's actually. I mean, and from when you look at the ancient African art of war, on the battlefield from the times of ancient Sudan, the same art of war has been applied where they would send in front, they would send in a small army that is not the strongest, and the people would come in, and then you would send your whole army towards them, thinking this is it, this is the real action. But and then those people would then retreat, but they're retreating into an ambush for you. It's a trap. It's deception. So in the art of war, white supremacy, you'd actually just forget about the ones that say they hate us, and uh, they black people this, black people that, and make all these funny statements that make black people go crazy and want to go up in arms. But the ones that are the most dangerous uh, are the ones are the white liberals. Malcolm X uh, made an analogy of the fox and the wolf. He explained that your most direct racist, the one that tells you we don't like you, we hate you, we want you dead, those ones are called the fox, the wolf. But they say in English the fox is sly. The fox got game. The fox pretends to be your friend. This is your Elvis Presley. He befriended the black people that invented rock and roll, and they embraced him, taught him everything that he knows. And by the time he was done with them, dumped them like a used piece of item, and went off to become the king of rock and roll, and hey, made millions. So the question really for me is, can you marry a conservative? Can you marry in the Ku Klux Klan? Can you marry a right winger? Can you date a right winger, a white right winger? If you say no, but you can date a liberal, that shows a very dangerous blind spot, because the ones that come and befriend you, go to your place and call your mother mama and date your cousins, those ones are the most dangerous, and history is enough data. And when we talk about also the whole thing of um, fighting white supremacy as humanity, one of the most recent things I discovered about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was the most interesting revelations when he was interviewed, and he mentioned that the white liberal has shown to be the biggest stumbling block to the movement for black liberation. And the white interviewer asked him, and he explained, and he would talk about how they would derail. And he first talks about in the beginning he had all this hope that we've got comrades, from the other race, it makes these other guys actually look bad, and it's not really all white people. So humanity standing together, they take out their time and they would participate and push this whole marches. If you look at white liberals, to show you that they're all racist, whenever they join a movement, they never join from the back. They always want to be in the forefront. They always want to be leading because they are there to redirect the movement, because it's easier to keep your enemies close. They say keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. That strategy can only be applied by your white liberal. So if if there are any good, loving white people out there, the question would be, what have they done to oppose white supremacy? Because everybody can do something. Everybody, you can hold a space as a white person and say, um, hey, you know what? We should stop talking nonsense about black people. They taught us everything we know: mathematics, physics, quantum physics, geometry, everything, the technology we use, the basis of it. So, but they're not there. Where are they? Mm. So, if anybody probably is in a relationship with a white person, yeah, they know they don't talk about blackness and reality. You're stuck in a world of fantasy and illusion. You're never in reality. You can never really, if you in South Africa, you can never talk about the land issue with your significant other from the other race. You can never, if you guys are truly in love, you should be talking about, yo, baby, your people were barbarians. Yes. I hope you don't come invade me and enslave me, after giving you everything, stuff like that. Like, you can't even make such jokes with them. You can't talk about reality, because if you do, your partner is probably going to say, oh, there you go with your race talk, I'm not into politics. Anybody that says they're not into politics, well, no, actually, it's not even politics, it's life, it's reality. So anyway, if your significant other from the other race, um, they see that black people are under attack. Imagine you live in the United States, and um, you guys are sitting there watching, and on the news another black person got shot by the police and killed. Can you guys talk about it? Well, your significant other is probably going to say, "Oh, these are racists. I hate them." So even when you look at the what makes it even more difficult for a lot of black people to understand is that when you look at the liberation movement in South Africa, for example, when I remember I watched a documentary of the participation of white people in the armed struggle. They were used by the ANC currently to smuggle weapons into the country because they would be least suspected. And when you look at in the movement, you see a whole lot of white people in the movement as well. Joe Slovos and your, yeah, all these different white people. And that confuses people, because what they don't understand is that a lot of your liberals, they do not want to see black people suffer at the end of the day. We're not saying, yeah, they don't want to see black people suffer. So they hate it. They're like, no, stop the killing of black people. Stop this. But, hey, guess what? They don't really want you to move up a position. Like, they don't want you to suffer, but they don't want you to to shine. They don't want you to be great. Hence, if they'll fight with you against oppression, if needs be or whatever, and obviously there are motives behind that. But let's then talk about. That's why like a lot of people love Gaddafi because he was a comrade and all that. But let's talk about the real conversation. When is North Africa going to be given back to its rightful owners, black people? Libya, Egypt. Nah, you can't have any of those conversations with Arabs. So my question is, how do you, with someone you're in a relationship with, and you're black and they're white, like myself right now, when I want to go to Sudan and I want to go to Egypt, can she go with me? Can we have the conversation? Can we talk about how white people destroyed the civilization? you know, so we can, because the person will probably respond with, "I was not there. I will not apologize for it. My my ancestors did that." Like, yeah, no, we're not. Actually, we're not even talking about the past. Forget the past. Let's talk about the present. When are you giving back the land? That's not the past. That's the present. So stuff like that. It's crazy. Yeah. Is there anyone that wants to? I forgot if there was a hand up or another hand up. I think Nono had a hand up, if I am not mistaken. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I hope you're all good.
We are awesome. Thank you.
I saw your conversation with TL host, and I didn't think it was done enough justice, right? I didn't think it was a thorough perspective. And yes, I think it's a bit nuanced to a certain extent, and obviously there are some isn't as obvious that you cannot deny, right?
Okay.
It's not history.
Yeah.
I like nuanced perspective, right?
Yeah.
Where he says that purpose may not necessarily be dependent on one race, right? And we also need to consider is there a universal purpose, And we know there are certain races that are just way behind in pushing the universal purpose, and there is the black people who are just at the bottom end of this stick, right? As had happened throughout history, as is how economies are based now, right? Just generally.
Okay.
That's how we have developing nations and developed countries that depend on meeting others. Cool. But so it's not a history, it's a current thing, this phenomena of white supremacy, right? Which is not, like, I agree with you, is not necessarily a real thing. Because if white supremacy is based on the preservation of white race, then with ease, it would actually benefit black people to even promote mixing, interrelational relationships and whatnot, right? Because we are the dominant gene, right? But then the problem with that is that we usually, in these interracial couples, we always see it in a white perspective. Like it will always be the blacks living in this white world. The relationship would be something that is just on the side that does not really depict reality, as you had mentioned. And the deviation from African culture in such unions does not even start with about slave beings, Yo, guys, I'm sorry for the noise, but yeah, yeah, but we just deviate from just the ethos of it.
All right. No, 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 no.
Sorry, can I complete? Yes, I was
Oh,
saying we just generally deviate from the ethos of living African lives, right? We
yeah,
just live Western lives, right?
yeah,
And we don't acknowledge that even things like marriage come about with the bringing of two families together, right? And in in having that happen, there are certain protocols and procedures that have to happen from the African sense, right? And if it does not happen like that, then that union is not even recognized. Yeah? Like it's not a marriage. If you come with your whatever perspective of marriage from the Western way, then the Africans are, and our cultures and our ancestry does not recognize them. So it's kind of a waste of time, right? And that brings more confusion and identity problems, right? If you really dig deep into umshado ngokwesintu requires ilobola nodule and all of those things, right? If that didn't happen, then there was no marriage. And that has consequences for children and the next rituals and all of those things, right?
okay.
You're gonna say,
Oh, no, my question was what is the universal okay, the first question was what is the universal purpose? And regarding us being a dominant race, genetically, yes, that's true. However, I don't know if you know Khama of Botswana, if you've seen his current generation. Khama the third was as black as they come. If you look at his descendants now, they are just white, not colored. They are white. I've actually shared the picture. So yeah, you may continue. What is the universal purpose? What purpose do we share as the so-called human race? Because I guess this whole concept of the human race is is always pushed by black people. I've never heard white people are not even. It's like a one-sided thing, and I don't do one-sidedness. Love is always two-way, huh? Hmm. I'd like to see, yeah, but yeah, what is the universal purpose?
good question, and we get, I would say when I may not be as most qualified to do so, right? I think you would need senior spiritualists to tell us what that means, right? And we must also acknowledge that just generally in the universe there's a balance. There are good forces and there are bad forces, evil, just generally.
Yeah.
There's the sun and there's the moon, and there's that balance, right?
Yep.
And I don't know where we are supposed to fit into that balance, but one day we must unpack that.
I'll unpack it very quickly for you. You said we are the dominant race, right? Okay. Who decided that we are the dominant race?
I cannot speculate, but
No, but I need to genetically.
I'm gonna say that the creator did it such or whatnot. I do not know.
Okay, no, you can say God decided that we be the dominant race. So if we are genetically the dominant race, and historically when we were the dominant in terms of socially and everything, the world was in a much better place. The environment, there was there was human progress. There was progress amongst humanity. For example, when you speak, when Ngozi mentioned the Greeks coming into Kemet, that was a time of progress for the human race, for all human beings, when black people were in charge. As soon as white people were in charge, people were dying, genocide, everything was just going backwards. Right now, the talk is the environment is being destroyed, rhinos are being becoming extinct. This animal because people are shooting them. The world is in disarray. It's like when the children are in charge, because the take over instead of the parents. You can never have order. So when you say we are the dominant race, if that's true, then it means we are supposed to be the dominant ones, yeah, on the planet in everything, and it's shown that that's the balance. Basically, if I would unpack it, that's the balance. We should be in charge, and white people should play their role as children that follow, and that has worked. And when they were in charge, look at Europe. Europe was lifted up out of black people went to Europe in 7-Eleven, became in charge, and Europe was lifted out of the Dark Ages. Then in the 1500s, white people took over, and we are sliding. We started right from the 1500s. We started sliding back into the Dark Age. Well, the Dark Ages started becoming universal. But yeah, so that's how I would put the balance. But when you also you speak of a universal purpose, and you also speak of two forces, evil forces and good forces. It means the two can never serve the same purpose. Uh, Darkness and light do not serve the same purpose. So Set, even when we go to Kemet, Set and Haru did not serve the same purpose, but the one served his purpose and the other served his purpose. It's like the lion and the impala. You know, they can never sit and cuddle. The one must be eaten, the other one must try to survive. And that's how we have the whole ecosystem balance, because sometimes the impala will win the race and run away, and sometimes the lion will win. So it gives us the balance. If you imagine if only the lions were as fast enough, then we would have a multiplication of lions, and impalas would die out, and then there would be no food for the lions. So it gives us a pretty much good balance, I would say. So yeah, I don't believe in not believe, I don't see any universal, how it's possible to have a universal purpose in that aspect, because the thing is, if you look at the difference between, there's a book by a South African author, Jordan King Gubani. It was released on the 1st of August 1979. It's called The Conflict of Minds. So I haven't yet read the book, but when um, I actually finally got the soft copy from one of the scholars that I follow, so he emailed it to me. So I haven't read it yet, but immediately when I saw that book, I knew what he was talking about. You know, before I even had access to the copy, because at the end of the day, the conflict of minds, the difference between, I always tell people that individualism, there's nothing wrong with individualism. Individualism works for white people, so it's nothing wrong for them, or the nucleus family, or whatever, individualism. But for Africans, it's never going to work. That's why you can go out whenever you take the standpoint of individualism as an African, you never win like Europeans would. It is their concept. It works for them because it's them. It's their genetic disposition. They thrive in individualism. Just like um, people who, when we go to school, like the difference between when you go to an exam room, you are not supposed to copy, right? Someone can say that's right. We're all raised to believe, okay, cooperation in the classroom is called copying. It's unethical. But when you go into the world, and even in the workplace, when they employ you to do your work, you focus on you compete with the other person. But in the world of business, it's totally opposite. You in the world of you win on the other side, and you become number one. You compete with everyone. You hide the information while you're writing exams so that nobody copies you, and then you win. But in in the world of business, for example, it's the opposite. How do business people become billionaires? Because they cooperate, they copy. You hire an accountant to do the work because you like, oh, they give you an assignment on accounting. You're like, oh, okay, I know an accountant, and then you call an accountant and they do the assignment for you. They don't do their own text submissions. They don't know. They don't need to know how to do it. So in their world, they win. So the whole thing. Hence, I even said that uh, projection sometimes becomes an issue when we. I gave in the beginning an example of arranged marriages when people come from a dating culture. They see arranged marriages as something that doesn't work and it's oppression and all that. But it works. And the stats show people, and I even say that people in arranged marriages are happier. And someone might disagree. And I would actually ask, why wouldn't they be happy? Because happiness is a matter of expectation. If bonuses are coming up and we both earn the same amount and we perform at the same level, and so we do the same amount. We don't know exactly how much we're gonna get, and I'm expecting 5,000 rands, and you're expecting 10,000 rands, or 15,000 rands. When the bonus comes in, we get the SMS. The money comes into the account, and it's 10,000. One of us will be happy. One will be disappointed. The one that was expecting 15,000 will be disappointed when they see the 10K come in. I, on the other hand, who expected 5,000 would be extremely rejuvenated to see that 10,000 right. So, happiness is a matter of expectations, and people that come from worlds of arranged marriages, they don't date. In like specific, I learned some weird thing in Pakistan. You don't even shake a woman's hand. So, as a woman, you will your husband will be the first male that's out of your family that who gets to touch you, whether it's your hand. So whether your husband that they've given you as your first husband, whether they're a terrible kisser or not, it's just gonna be great because where do you get expectations from? Like you've never kissed anyone else, so that's gonna be great. As I gave the sugar water example, my generation enjoyed it, but the kids today will not enjoy it because of exposure. So, uh,
On that
yeah,
on that point, I actually wanted to kick back on that point, man.
okay.
Also, yes. Now I hate to see old uh, bachelors and bachelorettes. Like it's so easy. It's a sad sight to watch, right? And I definitely think arranged marriage helps in that regard, right? And just generally, just yeah.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Man, let me finish.
Okay,
and
all right.
again, well, we know the dating culture versus the arranged marriages, right? I do not think the former is the most progressive of the two, right? And when you look at, okay, I watch a lot of these Indian shows on that look at how they do the arranged marriages, Sakon, and it's a proper process. They take a lot of time on it. Like they look at to family, history, astrology, and just how good a match the two are, right? Cool. So they took a lot into that, right? And also, Kuchwa in the Africans, they also did that back in the olden days, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it used to be.
Whatnot, right? And Lapayana, they used to, they used to do that. I think particularly the women, since they used to stay within the villages, they were very skilled at doing the masses, right? But
Yeah.
I disagree with you to say that love, marriage, and a pleasing match for the lineage is mutually exclusive. It's not. And we then
Please repeat
that
that. What's mutually exclusive?
love, the idea of love,
Yeah.
as well as a pleasing match for a lineage. And then I would then add that even from the spiritual perspective, Uchiwa, that they help find the match, you know? You know, everyone, many people say that Livumile Itama, the ancestors have a match, right? And then also the notion that spiritual diversity is liked, is preferred when a match is done, like is created, right? Hence they say they'll prefer umdu onomdawe would be a better match with umguni than another mdao, spirit possessed, you know? Because they can cause some conflicts and whatnot, right?
They can what?
So I think they can arise some conflicts. Like it firstly does not bring about diversity. Generally, diversity is preferred when we match, right? That's why incest is not good if it's frowned upon. Hence, we have clans and all of those things, right?
Yeah.
So I think even from that spiritual realm, they can influence the two people coming together on this dimension.
Okay.
Hence, you can be drawn towards each other and be a good match. So you can't completely say that falling in love and all of those things is un-African.
Okay, let me clarify. Yeah, well, the term falling in love, like we don't fall in love. It's a like historically we don't see something like falling in love, like a hence the examples I gave in the beginning. That culturally the concept of the cupid is a Western concept, and I showed that in the African construct using Kemet, the hieroglyph for love is a plow. Um, these are two separate concepts. So you must understand when we talk about falling in love, it's the whole concept of you don't choose who you love, you know. So if I can just if that was true, right? If that if that whole concept was true, you would find a rich person marrying a street kid. And if you look at people, most relationships, they're all within a certain class, you know, because uh, and what I mean by a certain class, obviously people, rich people always have to marry down. If you have money, you always have to marry down. So, but what I mean is most people, uh, like they marry with a like the like middle class people marry middle class people. You don't really most of the time, you know. It's yeah, like I'm trying to think of how to really break it down. And also when you look at basically relationships. The the average is always similar stuff. For example, let's look at interracial marriages. The question is if it's natural, you just don't choose who you love and you just fall. The cupid hits you and boom, you just fall in love with whoever you fell in love with. I'll come to you when you go to. Don't worry, I see your hand. The question now is when you look at the proximity between Europe and other parts of the planet, Europeans are closer to Asians. Well, Europe is part of Asia, so Europeans are closer to your Chinese and Indians, and Africans are a bit further. Now, when you look at most interracial marriages, the question is why are they mostly between black and white? You rarely find a Chinese and an Indian couple. Those are hard to find. Those are like, I'm not saying they're not there, but those are not the main thing. How is it that the biggest interracial relationships in the world are between black and white? The two people that are so far from each other and just so happen to have a very nasty history between them. Hmm. So if people just, if it's all organic, you know, so there are forces behind the so-called concept of falling in love and who people choose to be with and people's definition of what beauty is. You know, if you grew up in a place where light-skinned women are beautiful, you're probably gonna fall in love with a light-skinned woman. So everything is always driven by someone. It's either so love at the end of the day for me is driven by your values, interests, and principles. So if you don't have any, it will be driven by someone else's values, interests, and principles. So in the case where you live in a world where light skinned people are, or light skinned women are the most beautiful, um, it's not your values, it serves the values, interests, and principles of white supremacy. So therefore, your falling in love is derived by someone else's values, interests, and principles. So it's a matter of so we all gonna be driven by values, interests, and principles, whether it's ours or someone else's. It's just like when someone says, if you don't have a purpose, you're gonna serve. If you don't have a purpose to serve for yourself, you're gonna serve someone else's purpose. So if someone says, "No, I'm all about my career," you're basically saying, "I'm all about someone else's that guy's purpose who owns the company." So and no, when I said that white supremacy is not a real thing, what I meant is white people are not supreme. There's nothing supreme about them. It's a concept that is accepted by people. Like if you go to a place and you send I've spoken, I've seen if anybody is in the corporate world, wherever you're working, doing business, you will see that even in places where a black person might be the highest position, there will be a white person that is below them that's just running things. Like everybody, they like this have a strong command. Like people tend to listen to. There's in one place this lady, black lady, she would she had a white person reporting to her. She would use that white person to get her subordinates to do things quicker because she doesn't want to go through the thing of showing them and proving to them that she's in charge. So she would ask that white lady to tell them. As the saying, African proverb that says, uh, which means, I'm not going to do the literal translation, but the meaning of the proverb is if you want uh, things if you want things to get done, if you want black people to get things done, you put a white supervisor. a white person to supervise them, they will definitely get things done. So yeah, hence I say there are many dynamics around it, and yes, when you speak of diversity, diversity is not just diversity is not just diversity is not just blank differences between people. It's only diversity if uh, there is first and foremost a unifying factor. Because when we speak of amongst diversity, you can only speak of diversity among certain, like for example, if you look at apples, you've got red apples, green apples, whatever. You would call that diversity, you know, within that. But uh, water and oil, if you add water and oil, there's no diversity there. The two just don't mix. So that would be the difference. But diversity would be your flowers in the garden where you have this flowers and that species and they all make your garden look beautiful. But um, yeah, that's where, like as you mentioned, that when you talk about when people joining Mundawu and Munguni and we marry into different clans, yes, that's important. We all have, we are all Abantu, right? However, we have the same culture. There's just differences or variations within our culture, which brings in the diversity. So that's the type of diversity that creates a progression, but a type of differences where for one to exist, the other must be eliminated. That's basically, unfortunately, that's the reality between the coexistence between black and white. Uh, you can't have the two cultures coexisting. It's impossible. You can't have. How do you have individualism and umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu coexisting? You either one will dominate the other, and the other will be squashed. You will not have them coexisting. You can't be an individualist and an ubuntulist. If there is such, if I may play around with words and make up words for myself, you know. So yeah, Bonginkos, you may speak, bro.
You're saying a lot. And I think I'm just going to touch on key points that I think